You're listening to E-commerce Fastlane, the podcast show to help you build, manage, grow, and scale a successful and thriving company, powered by Shopify. Listen to real conversations with partners and subject matter experts as they share proven practical strategies, platforms, and the best Shopify apps to help you accelerate your business. The time is now for you to improve efficiencies, grow revenue, profit, and lifetime customer loyalty. Please welcome your host, startup founder, and strategic advisor, Steve Hutt.
Well, welcome back to another episode of E-commerce Fastlane. I'm your host, Steve Hutt. Thanks so much for joining me today. There are so many podcast choices to choose from, and I massively appreciate the fact that you're taking time and listening to today's episode. Now, my guest, I'm excited actually because this is a Shopify employee, actually a VP of Shopify. And we all know that I've been with Shopify, formerly for Shopify for 6.5 years as a merchant success manager. And it's really cool now to be on the other side of the table, so to speak, and be able to talk to some C-suite in Shopify and some product owners and champions. And it's really exciting. It's Mani Fazeli, who is the VP of product for checkout and B2B at Shopify. Now, Mani comes with a family of entrepreneurs. He brings nearly 2 decades of kind of professional experience to the table. His career really has been deeply rooted in entrepreneurship. We're going to learn a lot of that as we kind of get into this episode. Both as a startup founder, he's had multiple businesses. His current role at Shopify is so interesting. He's been very instrumental really in helping entrepreneurs to scale their business, but mostly now through the B2B side, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Mani's team at Shopify really has spearheaded the creation of what we're going to call this B2B on Shopify. I think it started early on in the days of 2022. They recognize that there's this multi-trillion-dollar opportunity out there in the B2B space. And under his leadership, B2B on Shopify really has seen remarkable growth from what I understand. I read a few articles. It's pretty exciting. I don't want to put words in his mouth yet because I want him to tell me the story, but I did read quickly that they are a leader in the Forrester Wave 2024 report about Shopify, the commerce solution for B2B. It really is solidifying their position kind of in the B2B market space. That's why Mani's work really is incredible. I want to get him on, learn more about what B2B is, why it's important, why it's a great channel to get involved in. So let's jump in and learn more. So hi, Mani. Welcome to E-commerce Fastlane.
Hi, Steve. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I kind of riffed a bit there at the beginning. It's so exciting to have a Shopify folk in chit-chatting about certain products. There's a lot of product inside Shopify, and it's just exciting how products are being pushed, and we iterate quickly. I still say we, even though I'm not a Shopify employee anymore, but I feel part of the family, and I'm excited to have you on today. So let's dig in a little bit about your insights first. I'd like to share with my audience about who you are, your background, and kind of what brought you to Shopify.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks so much for the intro. I should mention that while I've played my role, there have been so many amazing Shopify folk who've been building the software behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And without them, there's no way that we'd be the company we are now. So kudos to all of them, if any of them are listening. My background is a typical one of an immigrant family. So my family moved to Canada, where I live now, back when I was 9. And of course, whenever that kind of transition happens, it's the typical story of integrating into the new society. It could be kind of difficult because maybe your credentialing is not up to snuff, or you need experience in the country to be able to get traditional jobs. So a lot of people transition towards entrepreneurship, as did my parents, as did my aunts and uncles and everyone who moved over to Canada. And watching that, being entrenched in it and observing how it comes to life and the kinds of trials and tribulations that they got to go through really sat deep with me. So after I went through my traditional education, got my undergraduate and grad degrees, I didn't go into industry. I actually ended up starting my own company, did that for the first 7 years of my career, actually going between 3 different companies. And each of them was focused on helping the lives of entrepreneurs in its own respect. One time in the IT procurement and services industry, one time in the world of advertising and small businesses, and then one time in the world of small transportation operators. Think of it like motor coach operators that go intercity. Even after my stint in starting companies and scaling them, I transitioned to working for a great Toronto startup named Wave at the time. And their entire mission was to help small businesses and help brave entrepreneurs make, move, and manage their money. And we did that with accounting, invoicing, payroll, payments, that sort of thing. And so long before I came to Shopify, I was just deeply entrenched in this world. And of course, when I finally looked to make this move, where to go other than the company that literally has a mission that says make commerce better for everyone by being the entrepreneur company. Right. So it just felt like destiny, and I'm really glad that I made it here, and it's been just over 4 years now.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that story. I'd like to kind of, unpack the B2B offering. I think that's kind of the main reason why I have you on the show today. I've had other product champions on in different parts of the business, but the B2B is, to me, seems like an untapped opportunity when I read online about like the physical size of the opportunity and the fact that Shopify really has not been playing in that space effectively at all up until now. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about that, about like, why do you believe Shopify even cares about B2B? Why should merchants care about it? And then we'll get into the offering itself.
For sure. And Shopify has played in the B2B space since about 2016, or I want to say maybe early 2017. But we changed our approach and changed the way we think that this market needs to be tackled starting in 2021. And we'll learn more about that together as we chat. But the question you're asking is pretty deep. Like, why should people care about B2B? I like to think of it as maybe 3 or 4 points. The first one is the size of the market, then the changes that we're seeing in buyer demographics, maybe then shifts of how e-commerce is becoming more dominant in B2B, and then finally what we're seeing overall with the expansion beyond e-commerce. Okay. So if I hit on each of those, that first one, the big number that everyone loves to tout is that there's $12 trillion of opportunity and GMV flowing through the B2B markets, and that the conditions under which that is happening make the market a no-brainer for Shopify. And of course, it makes a no-brainer for merchants as well. But the fun thing about that number is it's so large and everyone can look at it and say, wait a minute, doesn't that include like all the commodities like gas, oil, lumber, cement, orange juice, whatever you want to include there? And it's not all going to be things like apparel, home and garden, automotive, electronics, that sort of stuff. That's like the bread and butter of Shopify today and where we're dominant. And my response to that is, yeah, of course, if you were to reduce the market and remove some of these parts, you would still be looking at a numbers that's so astronomical that it's a no-brainer for Shopify to care about this, especially after 20 years of being dominant in that D2C world. And so the opportunity is huge and the story's right there. By the way, it's funny that I say that those traditional commodity things are maybe not where the business is at, but just recently I learned about a giant meat processing company that is highly considering Shopify as their platform of choice. And they do a very large number of GMV. So the world is changing, right? So that's the first thing of just how big the market is. Then there's like the rise of the millennials. And you're taking a look at the way that they make up 73% of B2B purchasing decisions, according to Forrester. They're coming into positions of power as the purchase side. And they don't really want that 90s or early 2000s clunky experiences. They're used to the self-serve modern experiences that the D2C revolution brought to life. And as a fun aside, I fall into that early millennial space, and I'm currently doing a bathroom renovation, and my contractor had given me some websites of their distributors to go and find some of the parts that we need. And these are enormous SKU counts, right? Tons of derivative products. Yeah. And I'm trying to get through this stuff and find what I'm looking for, and I just want to gouge my eyes out at how atrocious the experience is.
Yeah.
And it just reminds me of like why I'm in this mission. And the great stat here is that 83% of buyers today prefer purchasing through digital self-serve channels instead of having to go through traditional sales reps or other means. And that's not to say that those sales reps don't matter. Of course they do. So long as they're adding value, that's always going to be part of the reality of B2B, but the world's expectations are changing.
Yeah. What's interesting about Shopify, and like you mentioned about the fact that the market size is there and the product is definitely iterated over time, because I can remember being a success team member, and unfortunately there appeared to be a very disjointed kind of experience where a lot of brands, even some today still, who haven't fully migrated over, are running on subdomains. They're doing some hacky workarounds to kind of make this B2B play kind of work for them. They saw the value in it and they needed it, but they did some hacky workarounds, and I'm glad that hacky workaround has been kind of removed. And so I want to talk a little bit about, I guess, your competitive moat that you have. Other than the D2C competitive moat we have, what do you believe is happening now with the B2B solution? Because there are other competitors, and like businesses and brands that I've managed were using competitive products over the years when I was managing them. Now that doesn't have to be the case anymore. So I'd like to talk about that approach, why the solution is kind of different. Nice to hear some tangible benefits of why Shopify brands now are fully bringing both their D2C and their B2B offerings together now.
Yeah, there's a ton to dig in there. So you think about how much B2B commerce used to be like spreadsheets and fax machines and such. And I think Gartner was saying something like 80% of wholesale commerce is supposed to come online now. So anyone who's not there is needing to catch up. So you take a look around at who's amazing at e-commerce and expansion beyond e-commerce. You get so many of these brands that are up-and-comers and rising, and they're asking the question of, should I open up my own retail store? But of course, the first thing that they should stop and ask is, how can I take advantage of the retail footprint of all those brands that are already out there?
Right.
And if I can market my product to them and sell through them, then I don't need to spend that $100,000 in the first year of opening up my retail store. I was looking up a stat actually that was reported by Ibis World. It's like 154,000 small specialty retail stores in the US today. That is a giant footprint for people to be taking advantage of. So that's what's happening.
Right.
And then you ask yourself the question of, okay, I'm also doing direct to consumer. That matters to my business. It's a higher margin play, but I want this expansion footprint. How do I do that? Should I set up two separate stacks? Should I be building and configuring software and hiring my agency or whoever needs to be involved with the technical and operation side? And the simple answer to that needs to be no. Why would you need to do that? So much of the business between B2B and D2C is identical. You're often selling the same products, but what you're adjusting is pricing, maybe the way the packaging or the quantities that factor in are, maybe some of your shipping behaviors because you're dealing with less than truckload or full truckload and you've got pallets that you might be shipping, like that sort of stuff might factor in and changes things. But otherwise, it's often the same people working in the company following many of the same processes. So you need the same software stack for the most part, and having to split this between two places makes no sense. And this is what ends up being unique about what we ended up bringing to the market. We built a piece of software that unifies both D2C and B2B onto one platform and often just one store. We've got very high percentages. Can't remember the stat just off the top of my head, but it's going to be somewhere in and around 50% of the merchants that we see end up actually using a single storefront. And they can do things like customize for just their B2B buyers on that storefront using a thing we call like storefront contextualizations in their theme. And the same thing applies to checkout. They can make customizations that only apply to their B2B customers in checkout, but otherwise everything else remains identical between the two platforms. And this is a big boon and lower cost of ownership, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, this is amazing. You know, it's funny though, I guess about maybe a month or so ago, I actually went through the Shopify editions. So I guess every 6 months there's a winter editions and there's a summer editions that came out. And recently with the Shopify editions, summer 2024 edition came out, having a whole dedicated section in there on selling wholesale. And I started going through some of the incredible features that are built into that. And it'd be great if you could kind of walk us through a couple of the highlights. I'll make sure I link the show notes to editions so people can see like the 150 kind of product. There's more than 150, but they're just saying 150, but there's way more than that. But in any case, in the sell wholesale section, it's quite interesting what's available. I'd love to hear it from you. Being the product champion, it'd be nice to understand some of the highlights that you're particularly proud of.
Yeah, the editions is such a wonderful way for us to be able to talk to all of our customers about what we've been up to.
Yeah.
And being able to like tell them a holistic story every 6 months as to what we've been building and why. But just before I jump to going through the latest, if the audience isn't familiar with what all the different parts of B2B on Shopify are, it might be jumping right to the latest and greatest and shiny objects that are part of our latest release. But
Right.
maybe what I'll do is talk about I will get there, but let's touch on a couple of things. So when we went to build this latest B2B on Shopify offering, and we were going to sunset and shut down our old wholesale channel that we were offering to our Plus merchants, we asked ourselves, okay, what is important to wholesale commerce? So the first thing is tailored buying that drives repeat purchases. And the second is you have to be able to understand who the true purchaser is, who is the legal entity making that purchase. It is not an individual doing a personal purchase. It is a company that's legally liable for paying you, for example, if that invoice goes unpaid.
Right.
And when we took a look at Shopify and we realized, okay, we represent a customer as an individual. There is no other way to do it. And that began the journey of how we reimagined B2B on Shopify by inventing this thing called companies. And companies could have one or more ship-to locations, and then they could have multiple contacts who are just the same as the customers that are in Shopify today. And then we centered all of the customization of B2B around that, and then that will help you appreciate some of the stuff we've done in the recent edition. So for example, if you want to do per customer pricing, it's actually done on the company ship-to locations. That's quite powerful. We built these ideas like catalogs that allow you to do custom pricing and custom publishing of your products, quantity pricing, volume pricing, you name it, it's in there. we invented this idea of payment terms and vaulted cards. So I need to make sure that this location is on net 30 or due on fulfillment. I want to be able to capture a credit card and put it on file so I can capture a payment when it becomes due without having to ask for the buyer to intervene again. I want to be able to handle things like ACH or wire transfer payments offline if I need to, but that still should get reconciled in Shopify. And then there's so many other bits, right? There's the self-serve portal. There is all the customizations I mentioned a bit about earlier with checkout and storefronts. There's how your sales rep get attached to, these different companies and locations so they can log into the admin and only see the records that are relevant to them. And if there's nothing else that listeners take away here is that we're kind of unwavering about becoming the absolute best B2B platform for merchants, from the fundamentals all the way up to never before seen kind of capabilities that only someone of our size with our merchant network can bring to life. And then this helps you appreciate what happened in the latest editions. I'm actually going to pull up all the different things we launched because even I'm, when you talk about all those versions of software that we're releasing all the time, even I forget what they all were. So for the world of wholesale, one of the big things that we announced was the ability to, for example, collect things like deposits. This ends up being a pretty common thing that you do at checkout where your customer needs to give you 20% or 30% for you to accept any order in order to de-risk things. We announced the idea that manual payment methods need to be something that can have like payment instructions associated with them that are visible to the customer so they don't need to reach out to you, remove the toil of back and forth with your customer so that they can actually get you paid. You think about some more sophisticated businesses who want a lot of control over their storefront, being able to build headless B2B stores, being able to take advantage of hydrogen examples, being able to access all the storefront and customer account APIs, and yet get all the same excellence of experience as we offer via the online store and with liquid themes. Lastly, you're always going to be looking for those ERP integrations coming out of the box. We recognize the more sophisticated a business is, perhaps the more specific of an integration that they need with their ERP, but still amazing to have something out of the box that works with bidirectional syncing and all that. So Microsoft Business Central announced that a couple of months ago that they've done their integration. We have Acumatica, we have Brightpearl, and there's more coming down the pipe as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the ERP integrations because that's always been a big challenge. And that's one thing I love about Shopify is the fact that you play quite nicely with other pieces of technology. And because a lot of kind of enterprise brands don't want to change a lot of pieces that are already working in different divisions of their business. It's kind of an interesting kind of next pivot question I have because you made a comment about, the sunsetted kind of wholesale sales channel. And that's where B2B and Shopify is kind of now sits. What I find interesting is, it used to be a value prop of a Shopify Plus. So enterprise, mid-market to enterprise brands had access to the wholesale channel. And we went down that journey for quite a few years. And some product adoption, but then overall people made their decisions how they're going to use the product. It seems to be quite a bit different today. So can we talk a little bit about the differences between if you're on Plus, mid-market to enterprise, how does the B2B offering work there? And then what other offerings are available? Just because I want to make sure that I have a diverse range of listeners today that may be on Core that are, sub $1 million in sales and they're just not quite there yet to be on Plus. And what offerings do they have available to them?
Yeah, great question. You're right that B2B on Shopify, when we went to build it, what we began was how can we give the better offering to those who were using the wholesale channel and build all the capabilities directly into the core so that all the APIs and apps and capabilities that come out of the box can also be used for B2B. So we also began with the Plus merchant base there. However, we do hear from our customers all the time that they're like, hey, can you bring us offerings that are more down market as well, more appropriate for our size? So now there's two angles to this. One of it is the same tooling that is available to Plus. Will we take a look at how to bring some of that down market? We're going to have a look at that. Nothing to promise here, but it's always on our mind. Mm-hmm. But what we do have in market today is Shopify Collective. So Collective, for those who aren't familiar, gives merchants the opportunity to partner with other like-minded brands on Shopify if they want to sell their products or source products for their store and give more expansion to their offering. And what we're doing is we're leveraging our global scale. We're getting merchants that end up having a competitive advantage by being able to connect with others and maybe do that in a cost-effective manner, not need to create that retail footprint in order to be able to get additional products sold and increase their margins or their average order value. And it works in a dropship model. So they're able to source and sell those products It's streamlined in the admin. They find everything within a single experience inside of the admin with the collective app. And we automatically sync inventory. We automatically share all the products. We handle all the orders in real time, creating orders in both systems. And we handle the financial exchange as well, making it really easy for this B2B experience to then allow the buy side to then turn around and sell that thing to their customer base without managing all the inventory. So this ends up being a really good way for those, nascent and growing brands to be able to get more into the B2B game as they continue to mature and then want to do true larger scale wholesale, which is what some of the other tooling is built for.
What I find interesting too is, like Plus starts, I think, around $2,500 a month. And I think, those listening today, if you're still on Core, and it's not a pitch to say, hey, I need to reach out to a sales rep and get on Plus, but you think about it, at your current rate, even on Advanced right now at $500 a month, you say, well, where's the extra $2,000 in value moving to Plus? And I'd argue there's quite a bit of extras you get. B2B is one of them, but increased API calls, and there's lots of other benefits that you get out of it. I'd also look at the total size of market for you from a wholesale perspective. If you're not doing it well or effectively, but now we have this solution available to you really for only an incremental value. If you just want to look at B2B only and saying, hey, it's only going to cost me $2,000 a month extra based on my current rate. We haven't really talked about the discount rates you get on Shopify payments. I mean, all of that summarized, I think the net could be only $1,000 more by going, 2.15%, let's say, as your discount rate through Shopify payments. So knowing all of these benefits, for an extra $1,000 a month, you get full access to Plus and an MSM network and all the extra Plus features. So am I on the right mindset here? This opportunity is really very effective for a lot of brands that are growing upwards of 1 million that haven't quite made that hurdle to Plus.
Yeah, we think very deeply about how to make sure that we're driving value in any one of our plans. And we often are discussing and debating what are the kind of the stepping stones to go from one plan to the other, and to make sure that there is that fair value exchange that the merchant is feeling, because their hard-earned dollars are going towards purchasing software that's meant to unlock new opportunity, new growth for their business. So we do stress about this all the time. And I tend to agree with you. Obviously, I have my biases, but there's plenty that comes with Plus. The entirety of checkout extensibility and being able to do customizations that allow for average order value, lifetime value, and conversion rate optimizations that go beyond the things that we're doing all the time behind the scenes. There's the entirety of the offering from B2B on Shopify. There's access to audiences to help with improving your return on ad spend. And then there's the API and MSM and rate cuts and everything else that you talked about, which when we take a look at the surveys that we run, we often see that the rate cuts and then B2B end up being the top two reasons for many of the merchants that are on the standard plan, or they might be on the like Shopify plan or basic plan or getting to advanced.
Right.
Often those are the features that very much interest them about coming over to Plus. So I never want someone to make that upgrade any earlier than their business needs it, but we work day and night tirelessly to make sure that we provide value on the other side for those who make that decision.
I'd also add one other product that I think is very impactful is the Markets Pro product. When you think about internationalization, and I think it is an exciting opportunity available, I believe, from what I remember, only to Plus brands because they're at that scale and the alignment that Shopify has with a strategic partner. So it's a pretty exciting opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I want to move into a case study, maybe even a success story or two. I know we kind of chatted offline before recording, but I think it's very impactful to say, hey, here's a few Shopify brands, notable businesses that we all know of. At least I know one of them quite well. I've purchased from them myself. So would love to hear the story of this or a few other brands that you can think of and say, hey, here's what their business used to be like kind of prior to B2B on Shopify. Here's them implementing it and now what their business looks like, their efficiencies and revenues and things like that. Anything you can share publicly, that would be really exciting.
Yeah, sure. We have a few case studies we've done on this, so people can definitely do some deeper reading if they want. What we've seen in terms of the growth that you'd expect for B2B it first came from the dominant industries where our direct-to-consumer footprint was really large. So apparel, home goods, food and beverage. And these are the people who have been leveraging the platform to run those hybrid businesses. But then we also began to see growth in other dimensions I'll touch on. But like the first example is Brooklinen, who's this like really beloved D2C brand. They actually make the pillow that I sleep on every night. So if you're listening, thank you for that.
Yep.
And, they were quite strategic in expanding into wholesale by taking bulk orders from hotels. And the company was originally managing this, mostly using the phone. They were wasting a lot of hours trying to input orders in manually using draft orders and sometimes even needing to do this offline. They ended up building this new B2B-centric storefront and managed the entire thing through the same backend as their D2C. And that ended up addressing specific needs that they had, where they wanted to make sure that it was all about customer-specific pricing, because the different chains and the different brands buying from them had their own negotiated rates. They wanted the flexible payment terms. They wanted to ensure that they did bulk discounting if higher volumes were going through the system. And they needed to ensure that the whole thing felt as intuitive, brand forward, and beautiful as the direct-to-consumer experience, because often it would be the same people who would be doing that kind of purchasing. And now their employees spend something close to 80% of their time working with their customers instead of a lot of that back-end admin stuff they used to be bogged down with. So that's a pretty good story.
Mm-hmm.
There was another brand that is quite famous, Lulu in Georgia. They have a great story of building lovely furniture, rugs, lamps, home decor. If you haven't checked them out, please do. Their VP of engineering told us how by making this adjustment, they went from this multi-step, multi-team process to being able to consolidate to just a few steps when they're accepting their orders. But both of those end up being the classic direct-to-consumer examples. Yeah, so one of the examples I'd really love to give that moves away from that traditional D2C is a B2B first industries, manufacturers, medical supplies example. But this one, in this case, is about Carrier, an HVAC company that also does many other industrial things. And they're an incredibly large public company. They have a pretty visionary e-commerce team that saw an opportunity to launch over 80 sites on Shopify in just a few months at a fraction of the cost that they used to do it with existing platforms. And what they've done is they've built this thing called One Commerce that's a wrapper around Shopify. With Shopify sitting under the hood, and they have their own set of configurations, customizations, integrations, and apps. And that allows them to stand up sites really quickly. So Steve on their side, he's this e-commerce director. He's quite ingenious, has a lot of foresight of what will it take to reshape their industry and to be competitive. And I just love how the answer to that ended up being using Shopify and working with us. And that's been great.
Yeah, it's amazing. Thanks so much for sharing that. It's nice to hear some on the ground kind of actual stories. I think there's a lot more. I'll put links in the show notes to the dedicated kind of B2B section, and there'll be a link to the summer editions, and you can really start unpacking a lot of that, even the Forrester Wave link, and where you can read that report. It's really, really interesting kind of what Shopify has done and the brands that they're making big impact on. So it's pretty exciting. Another question I had was about misconceptions. I think, and I know you've addressed a few of them right now about size of market and why people should do B2B. And depending on if you're on Core or Plus, you got the collective option if you're on Core. If you're on B2B, if you're on Plus, then you can go to the B2B offering. But are there any misconception that you've seen while building the product? And and how would you address or debunk some of these potential misconceptions or myths?
I would think that there are probably 2 or 3 misconceptions worth touching on.
Okay.
The obvious one from this conversation is that Shopify is just for D2C and it's just for small brands. Sure. So let's debunk that one. The market's often shocked when we're at these in real life events and they're like, hey, I never heard of you before in B2B. And now I see you everywhere in all the analyst reports. And oh my God, you leapt right to the leader position in the Forrester Wave. And what's going on? What are you guys doing over there? So that's the first one that I think we should debunk. But then a couple of others which aren't specific to us. It's really whoever is going to be your commerce stack. The first one there I'd say is McKinsey has this stat that they say they still see 1/3 of B2B is still stuck with spreadsheets and emails and such. But in the same report, they end up talking about how e-commerce has now surpassed all other channels in the world of B2B and wholesale commerce. And that 35% of the buyers that are doing this via e-commerce are comfortable spending $500,000 in a single digital transaction. And that blows my mind. I think they have a stat that says 15% are comfortable spending $1 million without ever having any intervention from a sales rep or someone that sits in the middle.
Wow.
And I don't know about you, but to me, that says the revolution has begun.
Yes.
And so which better company than Shopify to lean in there? Which connects really well to the last point that I think should be debunked again. irrespective of Shopify. It's the idea that you need to run your B2B commerce from your ERP because your ERP is the heart of your business for your B2B operations.
Right.
And time again, we hear this, and the merchants end up saying, I know that the tools can be clunky and utilitarian, but they deal with my esoteric workflow. And for us, we say, no, you should really be thinking about revisiting some of those business processes if you can, because the simplicity will allow you to really take advantage of the full omni-channel capabilities. And you got to think about direct e-commerce, yes, but also your sales rep, your trade shows, your distributors, your e-procurement solutions, your marketplaces, maybe even your physical storefronts. I think the takeaway there is no ERP is going to be the right place for you to run your sales, and you need a full stack e-commerce engine to do it right.
Yeah. So my final question is more about the people listening. The idea is that if they're not doing B2B or they're not doing it effectively, what do you believe kind of the next steps are for them to start investigating what Shopify has to offer? Because I think there's two camps right now. There's like, hey, I see the opportunity, and Shopify seems to be doing and building something incredible with great case studies. But on the flip side, I'm not sure that I'm ready for it yet. So like, what do you say to those people, and what do you believe kind of the next step should be?
Yeah, for those who are already with Shopify, you have access to a lot of content that very quickly lets you ramp up. Have a look at Collective. That's a great starting position and lets you test things out incredibly quickly with very low cost. If you're already a Plus merchant, you can use B2B on Shopify. You could test and play with it. There's nothing to turn on in the system. You literally go and create a company. You create a catalog. It's quite straightforward. At Summer Edition, we announced this notion of Shopify Markets, which is a pretty big bet for us. Yeah. It's a new central place in the admin where you can expand into all the different segments of business that go beyond maybe your traditional single region D2C. So that could be B2B, it could be retail, it could be international expansion. And markets are really where new B2B capabilities come to life, including be able to segment your B2B for different regions or having different subsets of your customer get different experiences and pricing and such. So you can learn a lot about Shopify Markets. And really the exploration, the neat thing about Shopify Editions is that we host all of the past ones online as well. You're able to go and peruse all of them and get a sense of how the product has morphed and evolved over time. So I highly encourage you to do that. It's just at shopify.com/editions and you can view them all. I think it was summer 2022 when Shopify first released the B2B product. So those are good experiences to go and get a feel for what we're up to. And then over here, I can tell you like some of the things that we're going to go focus on next. We don't usually share a lot, but the one thing you can bet on is that we are 100% honed in on the self-serve experience and ensuring that we remove as much toil for the merchant as possible so that they can get their prospective and new customers up and running and making purchases as fast as possible with as little intervention as is necessary. We think that's the secret to success. And of course, not all unified software is great, but all great software is unified. And that is the mission that we're on with B2B. You should be able to run it as a full stack offering without ever sacrificing anything in D2C.
This is amazing. Well, Monty, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'll make sure in today's episode in the show notes, I'll have links to these case studies. I'll have a link to the summer editions, the B2B landing page. It's a lot of great insights. Thank you so much for being so honest, transparent, and sharing. I know your time is valuable. I'm glad we're able to get this story out into the wild. There's like tens of thousands of people are going to listen to this episode, and it's great that we get to kind of tell the story of kind of where we're at today from a B2B perspective. It's so refreshing when I compare what it was like from the wholesale channel days and subdomains and no unification, no editing abilities to the design. I love the unified kind of look and feel. People know Shopify checkout. They know how it works. And it's amazing that now B2B is all blended towards in the same kind of D2C processes, but now for B2B. It's really exciting. And just once again, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really enjoyed the conversation.
All right. Have a great afternoon. Well, that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank you personally for being a loyal listener of E-commerce Fastlane. It's my hope that this podcast is offering you a ton of value through growth strategies, tactics, and exclusive insider tips on the best Shopify apps and marketing platforms, all with my personal goal to help you build, manage, grow, and scale a successful and thriving company powered by Shopify. Thanks for investing some time today and listening to the show. I'm so proud and excited that you have a growth mindset and are a constant learner. I truly appreciate you and your entrepreneurial journey. Enjoy the rest of the week and keep thriving with Shopify.